Greetings, everyone. I have an important message today, and that is that we're all already living in a false ether. And I'll explain what I mean by that statement. I am heavily informed by the work of Steiner, who created anthroposophy, spiritual science, over 100 years ago. However, I don't consider him a guru. I only use the teachings of anthroposophy to confirm my own mystical experiences, to elaborate on them, to contextualize them, to place them in a larger framework. So I don't use anthroposophy as a point of origin, but I use it as a subsequent body of work, framework, cosmology, to contextualize my experience, to use my intellect to explain the mystical, even though the mystical is beyond explanation, as we all know. So I will start a little bit differently today, which is I will share about the clairvoyant dreams that I've had. It's an aspect of my life that I don't really share widely or publicly, but I'm ready to open up given what's at stake today. So I had a dream about 2 or 3 years ago, and I think I really penetrated across the veil into what the essence of the Internet of Things is like, or the Internet of Bodies that is working alongside the Internet of Things, which is a network of connected devices and physical bodies that are what was shown to me. I was walking on the edge of a city, and on my left, I could see this smart environment where every single device and person had a reciprocity code to their interaction. So it was a little bit like a mechanized ballet. One person would press a button and the other person would have a physical response, and vice versa. Someone would push a button on a device, and or someone would utter a word and then there would be a response, but it would be sort of a hive mind ripple effect that would affect everything, a little bit like the butterfly effect. And I was observing this on the edge, meaning I felt myself outside of this simulation. I know many argue that we're in a simulation, and I agree to a certain extent. We are living, part of us is living in a simulation, but life itself in its totality can never be a simulation. So there's a part of us that resides in the natural ether, and there's a part of us that resides in the false ether, in the engineered, simulated environment. So what happened in that dream is I really had that sense of ethereal, like the people in the setting, they looked physical and real, but they also looked part virtual, meaning they looked slightly transparent and less fleshy than they would in real physical dimensional life. And so I was on the edge of this, and then all of a sudden, this Agent Smith character, just like in the Matrix, Agent Smith, looked to the side and noticed me, and he said, "We have not given her next script line yet." And I woke up after that, and wow, was that an incredible dream that I'm still contemplating to this day. I wasn't really living the scripted scenario. I wasn't living inside the program, and I haven't been given my next line. So I was out of line with what was happening in that dream. And fortunately, I'd like to celebrate. I think I'm very much out of line with certain technological developments that are oversaturating us. And I'm choosing to live a life that's outside of that framework. So that was one dream that I had 2, 3 years ago. And another dream I had more recently is I am people that are in my inner circle that are closer to me. I have strong psychic insights about them sometimes that I can't explain. And I had a dream about someone who had started to heavily use artificial intelligence in their life, to build with, not just to not just to do research and click here and there in a few apps. And so I had this dream that they were blabbering, that they were possessed and speaking gibberish. They were speaking some kind of language, as in sort of taken over by the Holy Spirit, but clearly it wasn't the Holy Spirit that had inhabited them at that moment. And next to them were these mannequins that were standing. And we know what mannequins represent. We dress them up, we put clothing, they're human-like, but they're not human, but we kind of go for the cheat experience to go window shopping and look at mannequins. We know are not humans, but somehow represent what things would look like if they were human. And so these mannequins were standing there as models, and the energy of the person, he was animated by this energy that wasn't his own energy, was then feeding into the mannequins, and then they were becoming animated simultaneously. So this electric current was traveling to the mannequins. And I said, wow, that must be a symbol of AI, or the energy behind it, sort of in a more esoteric sense of the word. So returning to my original statement, according to Rudolf Steiner, we have many bodies, and we have an etheric body. It's our chi body. It extends a few centimeters off our physical skin. It's also our book of life. It's where our entire life is recorded. And it's the body that is very, very crucial to our spiritual development. It decomposes about up to 3 days after our physical death. And then we continue on into the astral, where we can review this book of life and continue our spiritual evolution before the next incarnation and traverse the spheres of the cosmos. So unfortunately, what's happening today is that our etheric body, the very body that we expand and nourish through our immersion in nature, or our singing, or creative activities, or anything that is expanding the etheric body right now is very beneficial, because we're being crowded by other technological beings. The name for the being that is governing that process is called Ahriman. I'm not going to have a separate episode on that just yet, but you hear many podcasters talk about it, including Gigi Young and Douglas Gabriel and others. But our etheric body is being crowded by this technology that's so pervasive, and it's suffocating our living etheric forces, where also the Christ resides. So this false ether is really taking shape right now. It's really being layered, layer upon layer. We started with 3G, 4G, continuing to smart meters, 5G, 6G. And we are saturated in these non-native frequencies that, on a level of physical health, there's plenty studies that prove that these frequencies, the electromagnetic frequencies, are causing DNA damage, and they are affecting our calcium channels and the polarity of our cellular membrane, that is deciding how to excrete waste products and have nutrition come in and absorb nutritious substances. So it's throwing all of our systems off. It is cumulative. It doesn't happen overnight. The more we continue to live in this false ether, the more grave the consequences. And again, this doesn't end with the health aspects. That's not what I want to talk about. The spiritual ramifications of this is that we are converting our living energy into a deadening grid that then we become caged in. And so in this case, it's quite appropriate to bring up the book that I've been reading from an anthroposophical author. His name is Jeremy Naydler, and he wrote about the struggle for human future, 5G, augmented reality, and the Internet of Things. And he has really interesting excerpts in there, which I'd like to reference here. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading from the book. Let me share a screen here. Okay, so I'd like to share this graph here, which Steiner created this diagram over 100 years ago. I mean, I think about 120 years ago. And it's showing human thought as a living organism, as a living aspects of our lives, of being alive, that is existing within the realm of light. So I will mention here, I will quote from the book, that the idea that thought and light are intimately connected goes back a long way. Plato, who saw that there are really one and the same entity manifesting outwardly as light and inwardly as thought or human intelligence. For Plato, light and thought both emanate from the same source, which he identified as the idea of good. The intimate relationship between thought and light to which Steiner draws our attention was regarded as quite obvious by other ancient thinkers, as well as Plato, for example, Aristotle, and who also in the Middle Ages, it figures prominently in the writings of Thomas Aquinas, for whom sense perceptible light is a certain image of intelligible light. So basically, like, the light we experience in the world, is what this author says, is penetrated with thought. And if we were to ask, what is the thought content that the light holds, philosophers in ancient and medieval times would answer, the light holds the archetypal forms of all creatures. In other words, the inner organizing principle of each creature, the spiritual archetype that makes it what it is intrinsically luminous. So I think this is quite a bit of content to process here and to digest. And for Rudolf Steiner himself, he stated that every substance upon earth is condensed light. There is nothing in material existence in any form whatsoever that which is anything but condensed light. So there is an important overlap between light and the etheric realm. The light is the visible way in which we're perceiving the etheric, even though Rudolf Steiner said that light itself is invisible. It's just the outer manifestation of the etheric world. So how is electricity that mimics light different than natural light? I'm going to bring up another diagram here that the author of the book, I'm sorry, this is not the diagram. Hold on. I will stop the share and attempt to share. This is the one. Okay, well, this is the one. Excuse me, it was already open. So, as we know, artificial intelligence is occurring phenomenologically within the realm of electricity. Correct? We cannot have artificial intelligence without electricity. So here's what the book says. The relationship between electricity and artificial intelligence is one of mutual interdependence. Like, our thoughts cannot be turned off because we're connected to the cosmic ether, which is light. But artificial intelligence can be turned off because it's completely dependent upon electricity, a man-made form of light. And according to Steiner, let me just pause a little bit here. According to Steiner, light, electricity, the electrical current is actually the manifestation of beings that are trapped, that sacrifice themselves. They're less evolved, they're fallen beings that became light. Now, Rudolf Steiner is much more nuanced than, say, conventional Christianity in its understanding of evil, where in denominational Christianity, the idea of evil is all compressed into one dimension, and that's Satan. For Steiner, there's like a triad. So, and there's also a hierarchy in the spiritual world. So when we're speaking of a fallen being, we're not necessarily calling it evil, but we know it is of a lesser, evolutionary potential. So such beings, indeed, according to Steiner, are the constituents of electricity. And yeah, I mean, I can go into like reading specific quotes on electricity from Steiner, and they're like, whoa, a little bit spooky. But I still want to read from this book here and say that There's no artificial intelligence without electricity. As soon as the power supply goes off, our computer or smartphone collapses into total inertness. And likewise, the embedded sensors, transmitters, and actuators of the Internet of Things all function by receiving and transmitting electricity. So just as artificial intelligence depends upon electricity as a medium, so at the same time, electricity finds its fulfillment in artificial intelligence because it rises. That's a key component here, very important point. It rises to its highest level when it's digitized in binary code. For then it acquires intelligence, albeit only computational intelligence. Electricity and artificial intelligence should thus be regarded as two aspects of a single phenomenon. So what am I getting at here? Why am I reading from this book? I'm reading from this book because I want us to differentiate between knowledge, experience, thought that emanates from the natural source, which is light, and differentiate it from knowledge, data that emanates from an artificial source. And that is electricity. That is the type of thought that can only function and run along an electric wire. One is living, the other one is dead. We ourselves as human beings are animating it. We're animating the mannequin to look human-like, the robot, the humanoid. We are using our own energy reserves, our own etheric body, our own chi is feeding into this Frankenstein invention that we call technological process. But it is tapping into our own energy reserves. This is not without a cost, because our etheric body needs nourishment as well. And our thoughts need connection to divine source and each other. Our thoughts cannot be deadened and reduced to data alone. And this is really the message of today. And the reason why I shared my dreams with you is because there is this hidden component to what's happening with humanity today that is not regarded, that is not given enough weight, that we're lacking the wisdom to be rushing to destruction of our own innate capabilities and substituting it with an imitation. Some say, well, it's all the same source. You know, God created man and man is a creator and creating. The problem is we are co-creating with the creator, but we are playing God. In this instance, we are playing God and substituting natural processes with artificial ones. And the more we immerse ourselves in these false ethers, the less clairvoyant we will be, the less intuitive, the less telepathic or empathic. Because there's a spiritual component. There are beings that are working in these realms that are affecting us. So that's why I showed these two diagrams. These are completely different worlds. It cannot be denied. They cannot be compared spiritually. That something that travels along an electric wire is not of human origin or of cosmic origin. And furthermore, understanding Steiner's spiritual science, yes, we've accommodated these fallen beings. They're in our phones, they're in the laptop, they're in the microphone that I'm using right now. These fallen beings are inhabiting this harmonic technology. And we've made a deal with the devil. It's the lesser devil. that the big antichrist? That's the subject of another episode. And yet it is a compromise. It is a very tricky trickster game that we're playing that we need to be aware of. And what are we an embodiment of? Thank you for listening. I'm only trying to give this much at a time and not overload and overwhelm, because there's this soundbite pressure and there's this, retain their attention pressure and be sensational pressure. I want to show up as the deep thinker that I am and take the time to connect with you over these subjects. And I also want to have them in a relational discussion-based context. This is not me preaching. I'm just bringing up one facet of light, thought, and electricity, artificial intelligence. It's an inverted duality of light, thought, which is why the title of the chapter from which I read is called Recovering the Relationship Between Light and Thought. This is our work in the world today, is to recover the relationship between light and thought and to question where our thoughts are coming from. Whether they are script lines that have been planted or implanted, just like in my dream, whether they are authentic thoughts that are connected to the spirit realm, whether they are our genuine thoughts or programs that are running in the background and the foreground. Thanks for listening. This podcast will continue for sure. And thank you for being part of the journey. Please share if you resonate. And thank you so much. Blessings.